Iran launched a coordinated nighttime offensive that, according to multiple reports, included both kinetic strikes and cyber operations aimed at Israeli command and control systems. And Israeli authorities say they experienced at least localized disruptions to some communications networks as the crisis unfolded. This is breaking. I'm Narrator, and tonight we're tracking how a fast-moving, high-tech exchange across the region has momentarily degraded battlefield communications and forced commanders on both sides to adapt in real time. You're about to hear what happened during the nighttime phase of the fighting, what credible sources are reporting about the scope and limits of the disruption, why military planners say communications are the target of modern war, and what the human stakes are, from soldiers in the field to civilians trying to call loved ones. We'll also explain what remains unconfirmed, because in a situation this fluid, precision matters, and responsible journalism requires caution. Short background first, so everyone is on the same page. Over the past week, the United States and Israel carried out a series of strikes inside Iran that targeted missile sites, air defenses, and facilities associated with cyber and intelligence operations. Those strikes were accompanied, experts say, by coordinated cyber actions intended to blunt Iran's ability to detect and respond to the attacks. Journalists and analysts monitoring the networks recorded a dramatic drop in connectivity inside Iran in the immediate aftermath. Within hours, Iranian forces and affiliated groups began what officials described as a nighttime offensive against targets inside Israel, including missile salvos and, by several accounts, cyber probing and distributed denial-of-service activity aimed at critical infrastructure. The result, according to reports from both regional media and independent monitoring organizations, was interruption and confusion at multiple levels. Radar tracks that were degraded, commercial and military communications that were slowed or, in specific locations, temporarily unavailable, and an operational picture that commanders said had to be reconstructed from fragmentary sources. Those same sources stressed the disruption was uneven, serious in pockets, but not an across-the-board collapse of Israeli national communications. To be precise about what we can verify, independent monitors recorded a near-total collapse of public internet connectivity inside Iran immediately after the U.S.-Israeli strikes, with traffic levels plunging to a small fraction of normal. That blackout has been documented by organizations that continuously measure internet routing and traffic, and it has complicated reporting from inside Iran and hampered civilian communications. At the same time, multiple media outlets and government statements confirm that Iran launched missile barrages toward Israel, with explosions reported in central population centers. Those are the best documented elements we can report with confidence right now. Now, let's unpack the sequence that many analysts say explains why communications, not just missiles, became a front line. Modern military operations, especially at night, over long distances, and against integrated air defenses, rely on a continuously updated shared picture. Radar feeds, encrypted radio nets, satellite relays, and secure voice and data links that let headquarters direct fighters, missile defenses, and rescue teams. Disrupting those links does more than interrupt phones. It degrades targeting, slows decision cycles, and can force units to act on outdated information. Military cybersecurity experts told journalists that before kinetic strikes began, there were already cyber probes and warnings aimed at degrading those systems. During the nighttime exchanges, those probes appear to have intensified. Experts emphasize, however, that degraded and disabled are different words. In most documented cases, the evidence points to temporary disruption and localized outages rather than a complete nationwide blackout of Israeli military command networks. What does that mean on the ground? Multiple eyewitness accounts and emergency service reports describe chaotic scenes in some towns as air raid warnings. Missile tracking data and official alerts were delayed or difficult to receive by ordinary mobile users. Hospitals and first responders in several areas reported relying on backup channels and manual coordination because their primary systems were experiencing latency or intermittent failures. At least one municipal official described having to resort to handheld radios and face-to-face command huddles to organize an immediate response when digital links were unreliable. Those descriptions underline the human cost. When communications are hindered, rescue times slow, families cannot confirm the safety of relatives, and medical care is harder to coordinate. We should be candid. These are the kinds of secondary consequences that do not show up in the initial tally of damaged infrastructure, but are very real to people at the scene. Reports of casualties and damage are still being tallied by health ministries and local authorities. At the strategic level, military analysts argue that Iran's use of a combined arms approach, missiles, drones, and cyber operations timed for nighttime when radar coverage and visual observation are limited, aims to create fog and friction. The goal from Tehran's perspective, as analysts interpret it, is to saturate defenses and create windows where missile salvos and proxy strikes can have greater effect. Conversely, U.S. and Israeli doctrine emphasizes preemptive degradation of the opponent's sensors and command nodes to limit the effectiveness of retaliation. The interplay of those doctrines is what we are seeing now, a rapid sequence of attacks and countermeasures in which information systems and cyber tools are as important as physical munitions. Several defense analysts say this is emblematic of 21st century warfare, where tempo and information dominance can decide outcomes as much as raw firepower. There are important caveats. Many claims on social media about a total collapse of Israeli military coordination are either exaggerated or based on isolated incidents. Fact-checkers and independent analysts are flagging old footage and misattributed videos that resurface during crises, sometimes claiming damage or chaos that did not occur during this exchange. Journalists working in the region are advising caution. Chaos breeds rumor, and in the early hours of conflict, it's common for inaccurate clips to circulate widely before they are verified. We are therefore careful to distinguish between confirmed outages, official statements, and unverified claims that require further corroboration. Who is saying what? Israeli officials acknowledged incoming missile barrages and said missile defenses were activated. They also reported fighting and at least some casualties in populated areas. Iranian state media framed the action as retaliation and a legitimate military response to strikes on its territory. Independent monitors recorded the dramatic internet drop inside Iran, and cybersecurity firms reported waves of defacements, DDoS attacks, and disruptive probes across the region. At the same time, multiple international outlets described how U.S. and Israeli cyber operations earlier in the campaign had targeted Iranian networks as part of a broader effort to limit Tehran's military and command capabilities. What does this mean for the soldiers and civilians directly affected? For frontline troops, disrupted communications can mean delayed support and greater vulnerability during maneuvers. For civilians, the inability to receive timely alerts or to reach emergency services increases risk, particularly in densely populated areas where every minute counts. Families in multiple neighborhoods reported being unable to reach relatives abroad for hours because international messaging was slowed, and charities and humanitarian organizations are warning that restricted communications complicate evacuation planning and medical evacuations. Local hospitals that depend on automated supply chains and rapid diagnostic results have had to fall back on manual procedures in the short term. These are tangible consequences that amplify the psychological toll of otherwise brief kinetic exchanges. How are militaries adapting in this moment? Senior commanders on both sides say they have contingency plans for degraded communications. Those plans include redundant voice circuits, pre-planned maneuver corridors, and distributed decision-making authorities delegated to lower echelon commanders, so units can continue operations if higher-level command is temporarily blind. Experts caution that while these measures reduce the risk of catastrophic failure, they do not eliminate the increased fog that comes with fragmented situational awareness. In short, armies can fight without perfect communication, but fighting that way is slower, riskier, and more likely to produce mistakes. What should viewers outside the region understand about the risks of escalation? When communications are targeted and degraded, decision-makers face compressed timelines and greater uncertainty. That uncertainty can make misperceptions and miscalculations more likely. And miscalculation is the classic pathway from limited strikes to wider conflict. International actors, including neighboring states and global powers, are watching carefully because disruptions to critical infrastructure, sea lanes, energy flows, and satellite services can ripple across markets and raise the stakes for third parties. That's why diplomatic channels among allies have been active even as military exchanges continue. Stabilizing the information environment is part of preventing broader escalation. A final note on verification. As of this broadcast, there is credible evidence that Iran launched a nighttime offensive that combined missile and cyber elements, and that those actions caused real disruptions in communications for some Israeli localities and for Iranian citizens inside their own borders. independent monitoring organizations documented the near-total internet outage in Iran following the Allied strikes, and multiple outlets reported missile barrages and explosions in Israeli population centers. At the same time, no authoritative source has documented a total nationwide collapse of Israeli military command and control. And several cybersecurity firms and defense analysts stress the disruptions were significant, but localized rather than absolute. We will continue to follow updates, and will be clear when new facts emerge versus what remains unconfirmed. What to watch next? First, official military briefings from both sides for verified statements about the scope of damage and casualties. Second, reports from independent network monitoring groups that can confirm whether outages are localized or widespread. Third, statements from humanitarian organizations about civilian needs and access to medical aid. And fourth, diplomatic moves by outside powers attempting to de-escalate. Each of these will help move claims from rumor to verified fact, or, alternatively, show that some early claims were mistaken. To sum up, tonight's nighttime offensive highlighted the central role of communications in modern conflict. Iran's actions, a mix of missile strikes and cyber activity, did produce meaningful disruptions, and Israeli authorities reported localized communications problems that complicated emergency response and military coordination. However, the available evidence indicates these problems were uneven and not the same as a complete collapse of Israeli military capability. As with any fast-moving story, responsible reporting means distinguishing confirmed facts from unverified claims and continuing to cross-check every development as new information becomes available. If you found this useful, please like this video, subscribe for steady, factual updates, and drop your questions or observations in the comments. We read them and will answer as the facts become clearer. Thank you for watching, and we'll bring you the next verified update as soon as it's available.